Question 15 says to solve the inequality, and then it says remember to get 0 on one side, factor or rewrite as a single fraction in factored form, then find the values where their expression is equal to 0 or undefined and make a sign chart. So in this case, if the right-hand side of the inequality is already equal to 0, if that wasn't the case, you would need to move everything over to the left side and get a common denominator first and write as a single fraction. That step is done for us already. Our next step is to factor. So the numerator is already factored. There's nothing to factor there. The denominator, we can take out a GCF and we can factor that into x times x minus 5. And we're trying to see when this is less than or equal to 0. So with a rational inequality, you need to determine two things. You need to figure out what your zeros are, and that's going to be what's going to make your numerator equal to 0, which in this case would be 2. And then you also need to determine what your undefined values are. And the undefined values are what's going to make your denominator equal to 0, which in this case would be x equals 0 and x equals 5. And then you're going to make a sign chart with all of those values. So we're going to have you want to, again, always put them in order. So 0, 2, and 5. And then, again, this 2 is your 0, and the 0 and the 5 are undefined values. Sometimes it's helpful to label them so you're clear which one is the zeros and which ones are undefined. And then down the left-hand side, we're going to put our different factors, and then you're going to make your sign chart. So again, you're going to pick something less than 0, put it into x minus 2, so like -1. -1 minus 2 is negative. If we pick something between 0 and 2, that's going to be negative. Between 2 and 5 is going to be positive, and greater than 5 is going to be positive. Again, here we're going to get a negative, positive, positive, positive. Here we're going to get negative, 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 positive. And then the idea is that all of these positive and negatives are being multiplied and divided together. So you're trying to see overall, the expression is going to be positive here, negative, positive, and negative. And once you've done your sign chart, then you're going to determine, well, what is it that my inequality is actually asking me to do? I'm trying to see when is the function going to be less than or equal to 0. So that means I want to see when it's equal to 0. It means where I want to see where it's negative. So it's going to be negative in those two spots. And then you need to see where it's going to be equal to 0. Well, it's going to be equal to 0 when x equals 2. But it is not going to be equal to 0 at 0 and 5. These are going to be borders between where it's positive and negative, but they're actually, if you were to graph those would be asymptotes. And so we're going to have open circles right there because the function cannot actually be equal to 0 at that point. So once you've determined where your open and closed circles are here, and you know that it has to be negative, your solution is going to be in those spots right there. And then you can either write that as an inequality, or you can write it in interval notation, which is better. So you would go from -infinity to 0, not including 0. So you're going to put a round parenthesis. And then you would start at 2, including 2. So you're going to use a square bracket. And then you're going to go to 5, not including 5. So you're going to have a round parenthesis. And that would be your final solution. Again, you can sometimes use these sign charts also as you're graphing a function. This would tell you where the function is going to be negative, positive, negative, positive, and will help you determine where your function is and what the end behavior would be.